A number of years ago, I served on the board of the Community Service Council. Y'all familiar with that agency? We do the 211. We started 211. I was on the board when we started the 211 program for Tulsa. And actually now 211 is statewide, where you just dial 211 on your cell phone, computer, call, and you get resources for whatever your needs are, okay? And we've created a link where if you say you're a veteran, you'll go to the veteran resource. So we wanted Tulsa to be the top community in the nation in terms of helping veterans. And right now, the whole state has exploded. In fact, I talked to General Robinson, who heads up Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs, and he came to Tulsa and he saw what we were doing. He said, "Oh my gosh, we got to have this in Oklahoma City." Y'all know that Tulsa just runs crazy getting stuff going, and then it kind of spreads out, right? We're very entrepreneurial, very foundation-oriented city, got a great foundation to help us with what we do. Can you hear me okay? So, just to kind of give you a background there. When I was at ORU, 44 years, been involved in the Community Service Council. I helped start the coffee bunker. Mary Ligon, her son comes back from Iraq. He comes back from Iraq, and he dies by suicide. She taught me a lesson. She taught me something I didn't know. I said, "So your son committed suicide?" "No. He died by suicide." Her statement was, "Some die in the war over there, and some bring the war back here. It's in their brains, it's in their minds, and they can't resolve what's happening, and they die by suicide." And so one of the first things, I helped chair that program with the Community Service Council with Bob Ironton. He was general, brigadier general in the Air Force, commanded the Air Guard for Oklahoma. He'd been deployed several times. He and I worked on this, and with the board and others, we got a lot of things going. We started having meetings with people, and we began to see that there was a huge need for veteran services in this community. Huge. The East Coast, the West Coast have the military bases. Tulsa doesn't have a military base. We have Fort Sill, and we have Vance, and we have others around, but we don't have the military base supporting the veterans when they come out. And so we were getting a lot of veterans come into Oklahoma because it's cheaper to live here, but they bring that stuff in their brains with them when they come. Right? PTSD, moral injury, all that kind of stuff. So we got into moral injury. We did this, getting the veterans back in the community, but then we began to find, as we were working with them, I remember talking to Bill Nash. He is a doctor, psychiatrist with the Marines. He was here at the Zarro Symposium. We took him out to dinner one night. Said, "What is really going on here with this moral injury?" And he said, "We are losing 28 soldiers a day for suicide." At one point, it was in the low 20s, like 22. It's still down there. I mean, it's still around 20. But it had gone up. And he said, "We're trying to find out what's really happening here." And he began to research this and put together a lot of programs. And there's other people, Lips and others that come in on it. Volunteers of America. Volunteers of America is an organization that has a lot of these folks, these moral injury people that work there. Rita Brock with TCU started a moral injury program at Tulsa, Texas Christian University. She's been here on several occasions talking about what she does. She's now with the Veterans, the Volunteers of America. And she has created a program, an online program for medical professionals and others, online, confidential, where you can just enroll in a program and talk about your stuff in a confidential environment with other people. Have you ever heard of that? With the COVID, everybody quit meeting. So we had to find, and she created this online program. So very fascinating stuff. If you take the PowerPoint that I have here, you'll have all the slides. I can send them to you. Tim over here has them. He can give them to you. I'll be happy to give you whatever I have. I don't keep anything. I won't ever give everything away, okay? Because I think this is important. I did not serve in the military. I was a Vietnam guy, and I was able to keep a deferment to go to school. My dad served World War II. My son served in the Army, took the benefits from the Army, and went to OSU. Okay? So, but he was deployed at one point to Bosnia during that problems we had in Bosnia. And he now has a berry farm in South Tulsa, blueberries, blackberries, pecans, and they're picking now, if you have any interest in picking berries. And we have a program for the veterans to come down to his place and pick them free. Now, he does charge a fee because, you know, he's making some money off of it, but he does landscape and tree business as well. So, just to say that we have a lot going on now, and we used to have these meetings, and there would be this many people and more in a meeting talking about, and you're new, and you're new, and you're new, and you've got this new program. One guy comes in and says, I'm taking disabled vets who've lost their limbs to Africa on shooting a safari. Make sense? They're in wheelchairs, they have no legs, but they can shoot a rifle still. And he takes them, he has a program, raises money for them. He's an Air Force guy, and that's his mission. And we have a lot of things going on around the state that others have got from what we do here. Muskogee has a program, Lawton has a program. They're around, okay? That groups have taken what we've done and tried to replicate those activities in their areas, okay? So, we're going to get into moral entry. And I have a lot of writing. I don't have a lot of slides, but I have a lot of writing. That's good for this one.
Shoot.
Okay.
The laptop.
The laptop.
The laptop. You can shoot from there.
I gotta go this way. Oh, this way. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta get oriented. So you can see the objectives real quickly. You're going to gain an understanding of moral entry, how we define it, how we apply it specifically to the military, but it's everywhere. If you go online to YouTube and type in moral entry, you're going to find all kinds of stuff on moral entry. You're going to find lectures by Rita Brock and her organization. You're going to find some great stuff in there, okay? And I'm going to show you some YouTube videos here in a minute, just to kind of get you to understand what we're dealing with, okay? We're going to talk about first responders, listen, pastors, first responders, medical professionals, and more have issues with moral entry. Not just soldiers, but all of us. You may have a moral entry. I may have a moral entry. We'll talk about it. Examine resources, and then share your thoughts. We're going to talk about, I want you to participate. If you have any questions anytime, raise your hand or just speak out. And we'll talk about it, okay? So, I guess I got to go back. Okay. This comes out of Syracuse University. Syracuse is one of the leading universities in the country on working with veterans who come to Syracuse, and they've got all kinds of programs for these guys, okay? And gals, women too. Damage done to your conscience or moral compass. I like the word moral compass. Your moral compass kind of guides you. True? when that person perpetrates, does something, they witness or fail to prevent acts that transgress the moral beliefs, values, or ethical code of conduct. Y'all follow? That's their definition. There's probably 50 or so definitions of moral injury, but they all include these types of things. Okay? So, this is a little bit wordy, but I just want to explain to you a little bit. The military, the VA, has done a great job in training people how to work with post-traumatic stress. In fact, a lady by the name of Nancy Bernardi from Oklahoma is on that committee with the VA that vets all the programs that they push out to the VA hospitals and clinics around the country. Okay, they pushed out the first program, we'll get to that, was cognitive processing therapy. And we'll get to some of those, but just to kind of give you an image, we have to differentiate post-traumatic stress from moral injury. Can y'all see that? Okay, PTSD, fear-based. It triggers an alarm system in the amygdala, in the brain, middle of the brain. Adrenaline, cortisol spurts in the bloodstream, hyper alert, breathing hard, tense muscles, eyes wide open, pulse racing, triggering a reaction of fight or flight. That's basically your post-traumatic stress. A false alarm. You have to be on that kind of alert in the military. If you're deployed oftentimes, right? You're an active military, you have to be alert. You have to have that going, in a sense. That's normal, natural for you. But you're back home, and you go to Walmart, and it's a bustling, crowded, noisy supermarket. We're getting ready to have the 4th of July. 4th of July fireworks really is a problem for a lot of our veterans because it triggers all that they went through when they were deployed, right? So the amygdala picks up on potential sign of danger, goes into action, not knowing the person's no longer in the war zone. It's just an automatic response. Response the same: sweating, gasping, run out of store, gets in the car, panicking, slumped over the steering wheel, out of breath. All right? That is your post-traumatic stress. And veterans are given therapy at the VA Center here, in Muskogee, on this, PTSD. Okay? PTSD is a mental health thing. You guys work with it. Sure, with some of the people in your churches, your house churches. Okay, moral injury is values, not fear-based. It's in the frontal part of your brain. Person has time to reflect on a values-wrenching experience. Asks, did I do the right thing? Or shouldn't I have done what I did? Or could I have done something different? I was ordered to do something that violated my moral code. Or I was personally violated in some way in the military. We have a lot of sexual trauma with women in the military, and men, but women in particular. And so a woman, she's raped, blamed, etc., accused for there's another one accused for a wrong engagement, rules of engagement, ROE, the rules of engagement, who you can shoot, how you can shoot, all this becomes controlled by your superiors, by the president, by Congress. You can violate those and get in trouble, and you actually get court-martialed if you violate the rules of engagement. So the soldier says, we blew up the building, but didn't realize children were inside. We killed one, injuring 2 others, feeling shame and dejection. He says, I killed a child. There's something about killing children among our soldiers that's a real issue. There's something about children. Doesn't matter where that child comes from. The soldier kills an enemy combatant who fires at him. Afterward, he checks the man's pockets. Afterwards, he checks his pockets only to find pictures of his parents, wife, and children. And he regrets, I killed the father. Even when he tried to kill me, he still feels, I killed the father of this family. Y'all follow what I'm saying? For many people, it doesn't matter. They walk away and they're done. I killed this guy. But, you know, a lot of folks, killing is a problem, even if you're in the military. Do you realize in some of our past wars, not everybody shot their rifles at the enemy? Then the military had to figure out after World War, well, I guess it was World War II, where about half did not fire their rifles straight at the enemy. They fired them in the air. So they found out that they had to make you shoot more impulsively. They created a weapon, the M16, that could fire rapid fire. Y'all follow? And it takes away some of that personal side of it. We had to create a military that was going to kill. That's why you're in the military. True? You're prepared to kill, and you answer the call to go and kill from your government when you have to go. Okay, moving on. But you can see this is complex. You've got PTSD over here on the left, startled, memory loss, fear, flashbacks. On the right side, sorrow, grief, regret, shame, alienation. Shame is one of the key ones here. In the middle, they share a commonality. Anger, depression, anxiety, self-medication, insomnia, nightmares. So, here's the deal. The VA is now rolling out moral injury stuff because not every treatment they develop for PTSD relates to moral injury. Because you're dealing with, in moral injury, trauma. I mean, in PTSD, you're dealing with trauma. In moral injury, you're dealing with values, code of ethics, what your grandpa told you, what your grandma told you, what your school teacher, your coach told you. These things become part of your value system. Okay. So, many soldiers are barely out of their teens today. We are not recruiting, we don't have a draft. We have a volunteer military. We're getting young kids. I'm on the board of the Coffee Bunker, and we're reaching out to the high schools in the community to inform them of services that we have post-deployment. And we've got about 300 kids that we're looking at right now to tell them about what they can have access to when they get out of the military and they come back home. Make sense? So, so the military has been stretched. Multiple deployments. At one point, you guys, we were sending the National Guard to fight in Afghanistan. And we lost 15 or 16 of those great people from our state by roadside bombs. All right? One was a young mother, 18 years old, had a baby, wanted to go to college, be a nurse, and she knew she could get there through the military, through the Guard. And she was the first one died by roadside bomb. So, anyway, so this put us in a bind. We have what? 200,000 actively trained shooting soldiers in this country. We have a military of 2 million, but they're not all combat. Does that make sense to you? And they're deployed over and over. Some are on 4 and 5 deployments, and they come back. And it's very difficult to get back into society here and then go back deployed again. back and forth. So, let me give you some names. When somebody says OIF, that's the first war in Iraq. OND, New Dawn, that's Iraq. The second time we went in. Remember? Twice? OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan. And we've been there, that's our longest war. We've been fighting these wars 2003, and we just now have begun to remove people from Afghanistan. Right? That's a long time, being in war. Now, I always find it this way. When you talk to a soldier, don't just say, one on the street, thank you for your service. That's empty. I always ask them, engage a conversation. Tell me about your MOS. They will then tell you. I've not had any soldier not tell me what he did. He's proud of what he did. She's proud of what she did, of what they did in the military. But the MOS is Military Occupational Code. The Army, that you can use MOS for any of them. But specifically for the Air Force, AF, SC, and the Navy is NAC. So, talk to veterans that you meet in your house churches and so forth. Talk to them about their MOS. They know what it is. They will tell you. You will identify more closely with them than just to say, thank you for your service, welcome home, kind of thing. Y'all with me? Any questions about any of that stuff? Okay. So, just war. We get into this, and this affects the minds of our soldiers as well. War should be a moral response to a great wrong, a self-defense response to aggression, protect victims of injustice. Killing is either the moral thing to do or to murder. That's what Obama said. St. Augustine, his doctrine, relieved individual soldiers for killing if they did so in obedience to a higher authority, the church. The Catholic Church position is that the use of arms should not produce greater evils greater than the evil to be eliminated. Those are some of the thoughts and teachings and stuff that you put in your head. Often soldiers get caught between left to decide on their own whether a particular action is just or not, resulting in an epidemic of moral injury. Is it right or wrong to do what I'm doing? And then you have the spillover. You kill women and children with all of that. Okay? One group of people, military folks that are struggling with a lot of this, are drone pilots. You can fly a drone from out west. It's maintained in Afghanistan. The drone flies over and is watching what goes on in the village, the town, certain houses. Okay, one day, a vehicle drives up, guys get out of this vehicle, they're armed, and they look like some leadership here. We need to take them out. Drone pilot reports back, this is what I see. They say, take them out. A bomb is dropped, place is blown up, everybody's dead, but you have to stay around and see, did you get everybody? And they see children laying in the road. What does that do to you as a drone pilot? You killed a child or children and their wives. So y'all got me? I mean, some of these folks have real struggles. Drone pilots that are here in the States, flying over there. Okay. The feeling of loss of buddies can linger for years. Some societies, past and present, Native Americans, the Pawnee tribe, I talked to the president of the Pawnee tribe, he says, we're a warrior tribe. And we have ceremonies to send our young men and women to war, and we have ceremonies when we bring them back. And we work with them when they're back here to help them recover from whatever mental injuries they've had in the war. We have a song and dance for them when they leave. And we have a song and dance for them when they come back. And they're welcome. What happens to the typical soldier in America when he comes back home? Yeah, he's in a different world. He's totally in a different realm than where he was just a few hours before. As one of my friends told me, he was at a luncheon with one of his friends, and his friend told him, he said, my son came home the other day. I took him out to a restaurant to eat. I ordered off the menu. I asked my son, are you going to order? He had the menu over his face. And he said, Father, you don't realize that just yesterday I killed 6 Afghans. And now I'm in Tulsa. Where am I? I mean, I can't eat this. He was having, now hopefully he will adjust, but he was struggling between the flight, killing here, flying here, and he's back at it again. You follow me? At home. So it's like these guys and gals go fight for us, but the rest of the world goes to the ball. Do we really understand what they're doing, what's happening to them, what they're experiencing? Okay. Another thing is, today we're likely to bring social songs, call them heroes, thank them for what they do. That's why I say don't thank them for what they do. Ask about their MOS, get them to talk about themselves and what they did in the military. Killing is linked to suicide. Veterans in combat have suicidal thoughts twice those that have not had combat experience. And because of their killing experiences, many cannot go back to their spiritual communities, will not go back to them. I have people in my church tell me about their sons that, nieces and nephews and so forth that will not go to church because they're disconnected from the spiritual world. And so many cannot go back to spiritual communities. They have feelings they don't deserve to be happy anymore. They have children. They shouldn't have children. Or a successful marital relationship. A lot of marriages fail with these guys when they get back home. Believing they are non-deserving to be happy for what they've gone through. Can anybody relate to this yourselves? You can relate to that? So we're kind of on target here? Okay, getting help. Self-forgiveness is key. You've got to find a way to forgive yourself. To forgive self would mean condoning one's actions. You follow me? It's a disconnect between forgiveness and condoning what I was told to do and what I actually did. Subverting the need for punishment. 3, inferring with the need to feel unworthy, non-deserving of forgiveness. I don't deserve to be forgiven by God or anybody else because of what I have done. I do recommend, there's a video, the book Tribe by Sebastian Younger is a great book about the Korengal Valley in Afghanistan where most of the fighting occurred and how these young men really bonded, how they were shot up, how they were patched up, what happened to them when one of their colleagues, one of their fellow soldiers was killed. And new ones that came in. That band, that tight band of brothers it's stronger than anywhere else because you're working to save yourself along with your fellow soldier. Can anybody relate to that? So, families and friends don't understand. And survival is there dependent on adrenaline to keep them alive, along with paranoia, hypervigilance, aggressiveness, sleeplessness. It kept them alive there. But what keeps them alive here? So, cognitive processing therapy, CBT, that's been used a lot. That's the main therapy rolled out to the VA. Exposure therapy is another one that they've used. Group therapy, I always like group therapy. I've done a lot of group therapy. That's where you get people to sit around and talk to each other. EMDR, that's a newer one that the VA has approved to use as treatment. However, Nancy Bernardi, I mentioned her before, who vets all these programs, came to the Zorro about 4 years ago, Zorro, the big conference, and she said, we have found that WET is probably the most effective of all. You get the veterans in a circle and they write by hand, not typing, they write by hand their stories and then talk about those stories and support each other. She said, we have found that is the most effective program that we have. She said, cognitive processing, it's a detailed program. It may take you 12 appointments to go, but you might drop out after the 4th one because you get tired of having to go. Make sense? You wonder if you're getting the results. But the WET, she says, is one of the best programs that she has found. And you have to write it out and share it in a small group. Now you guys have house churches, right? You're working with house churches, small churches. You guys are small. Not all of you. House church first. But here, you guys are. I would say a church, a fellowship for veterans. Here and here and here, with people who know what they're doing and talking to veterans, getting them to talk about their stories. Because in talking about their stories brings healing. Okay, adaptive disclosure. I have a book back here, Adaptive Disclosure, using the empty chair gestalt technique, the therapeutic way of doing it. Apportioning blame. In other words, what percentage of blame do you give if you're riding in a vehicle, you're the driver, and the man next to you is hit with a sniper? You blame yourself. I turned the wrong way to avoid a roadblock. You follow? You blame yourself. How much? 100% some of these guys do. So what you might say is, who else is to blame? What about the commanding officer that had you go this way in the first place? What about the sniper who was good? He knows what he's doing, that's why he's a sniper. And you begin to get them to see that the percentage of blame maybe is less than they really think it is. It's just one little technique that's used in there. And self-forgiveness. I've got a book back here on self-forgiveness. Okay, now here's the thing. I've got 3 different slides on one. Come alongside, listen reflectively, reflective listening. Listen, hear the story, repeat back a little bit here and there. Ask a question, that's reflective listening. Listen for the moral injury, which is values-based, not the trauma. You can also hear the trauma name. Ask questions about the moral injury. Explore options for helping. Some basic things you can do at the top. Now, when you're working with somebody and they use this stuff over here to the right side, they say, I regret that I did this. You hear people say, I regret, they're talking about something that has affected their conscience, right? Their moral code. I'm ashamed for what I did or didn't do. Shame is a big factor of moral injury. I can't tell anyone about this, which you might tell veterans like you in a circle. Okay? I don't deserve to be happy. I'm not the same after this happened. No one really understands what really happened to me over there. if I could redo this, I would do something different. When you hear people talking those kinds of words and language, they're probably talking about a moral injury. Over here on the left, maybe they don't want to talk about anything. Social workers. I'm a social worker. I've worked with social workers. I do consulting for child welfare. I'm assigned to go and do debriefings. I have a contract to do debriefings when there's a child death or a crisis in the agency, all around the state. And I've done that for probably 15 years. So, or more. Social work, therapists, what you take in working with people. What are you doing for yourself? Child welfare. I have a tape here, a clip, about a 10-minute clip about child welfare workers. They're down here. The DA, the assistant DA is here. Yummy. DHS administration's in there somewhere. And a child dies. Their mission is to keep children alive, keep them safe. But they didn't cause a child to die, but sometimes they really take it on themselves because of the energy they put into that child and the family, and the death came about anyway. You got me? Not everybody, but depends on you individually, your unique training, values, who you are as a person could affect you. And then you've got, I don't know what word, medical. I've got a video clip here that medical doctors have a high incidence of suicide, and higher since the COVID. And nurses. Did y'all know that? There's an organization. There's a moral injury organization that works with doctors and the medical profession. I can give you their website. Okay. Police, first responders. That could be fire trucks going into a home that's on fire and seeing a dead child. Or a car wreck. What's that? That terrible wreck that happened this past weekend. All those cars, and 8 kids killed in that one van. Those are foster care kids. And you say, we're trying to help these kids and move them on. Can you imagine the staff and the families working with these kids? They were just going to go out for a leisurely time at the city. Was it Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama? Go. Police. And there is a big movement today to get police officers into groups, talking to chaplains. I've talked to some of them to get moral injury training, debriefing what they experience. Right? Any first responder, please, any law enforcement person. And religious. I've talked to people who have had pastors who've been burned out. And you have too. They're burned out of their ministry for what's happened to them. I've worked with young ministers. And one issue builds up to another, and the only way out is go to another church. If you can. But I've worked with ministers who were basically burned out. And I think a lot of it had to do with the moral injury stuff that they were having to deal with. Their values, what they came into the ministry with. They can't fulfill it. And all of us, probably in this room, we all have maybe that amount, maybe that amount of moral injury. Somewhere. Something's happened to us. True? It may not bother us at all. We don't have nightmares over it. But we've all been bothered by it. But some have had major stuff. And our military people, this really has come out to the forefront. There's no DSM-5 diagnosis for it. There is for PTSD. But the military had to address this to find a way to save soldiers coming back to the U.S. Chaplains are being trained in it now too. Okay. So here's some books. I've got some of them on the table. The last one I have on the list here, Brad Kelly, Moral Injury, the Bible and Moral Injury. He goes through the entire Bible and talks about moral injury to the various characters in the Bible. And he is well respected, he's well written, he's written a lot of stuff on this. He's quoted quite a bit about it. So, and then Alan Wolfeld, I like him, reframing PTSD as traumatic grief. And I like, Wolfeld does a lot of work in the area of, what you might say, death and dying, and working with people. And I really recommend his book. The VA here in Tulsa, Carter Check is a chaplain with the VA. He's over at the 169 office, across from the Quick Trip, you know, the tower there. And he does nothing but moral injury groups around the country, online. He has online moral injury groups with soldiers around the country who are out of the military or home on leave, whatever. He puts them in groups, they read his book, and they actually share in a confidential arrangement with his work, okay?
This is who, I'm sorry.
Carter Check, C-H-E-C-K. He's not in this one.
Okay.
Now, the fixedmoralinjury.org, that's the one for medical professionals. Moral Injury Project, Syracuse, this is a university which is really kind of a leader in addressing moral injury with students. The WebMD is Rita Brock. If you go on that WebMD and you can take, I'll send you this stuff, you can click on it and use it. But that's the one where Rita talks about her work in moral injury. She used to be at TCU in their Bright Divinity School, had a moral injury program. And she is now with the Veterans of America, VOA. And all these thinkers and writers and researchers belong to this VOA program. So they have got a ton of stuff, and they're putting stuff on YouTube all the time about what they're doing. And then that's the VOA on the bottom, is that group I told you about. You can get in that group. Any of you guys can get in the group. It's confidential. You're paired in there with about 5 other people, and you share confidentially your moral injury. You don't know anybody except their first name. And it's all done confidential, the way they worked it out with the volunteers of America. Okay? So that's a YouTube. It disappeared for me. Oh, can I get it that way? Let's see. I have some links. And I want, how much time we have? A week?
You got the clock. You got to 9.
15 minutes. Okay, let's do some questions.
Appreciate all this. It's applicable. In our network of home-based churches, we run into what would be traditionally called a backslidden Christian. Many of those have not fallen away from Jesus, they've fallen away from the form that he was presented in, and they fall away because of the moral failure of a leader. Do you find that related to, I see a lot of similarities.
Absolutely.
Not on the level of killing children in Afghanistan, but their whole world crashes apart, or something doesn't line up with their theology, their spouse gets cancer and dies, things of that nature.
Yeah, and sexual assault in the military is very strong, very high. And can you imagine, I've talked to students, talked to a student who, from ORU, she shared her story to the veterans about her being
abuse in a church
Yeah,
fall
and,
under the
and,
same
and she
category?
can, huh?
Abuse, moral failure in a church setting fall into the same moral injury, so
Yeah.
it's moral
Yeah, yeah.
injury.
And I
Moral
work
for
with,
injury.
I work with some of these young ministers who really struggle with what, back in those days, what we see now is what they were struggling with, some moral injury within themselves, within people in their church, trying to address that. They had no resources for that. All right? Okay,
Lanny,
yes.
just to tell you, in the room you have ministry leaders of various type. You have chaplains, you have staff people, you have nursery related, therapy related, counseling related, so it's quite a broad spectrum.
Yes, and I take this PowerPoint with you and look at those words that people might give you. I feel ashamed.
Work in all those
Shame,
contexts.
shame is a big, big factor of moral injury. You've done something to violate your value system. And you might say, how did you, I don't have shame for anything like that. I've had similar things, but it doesn't shame me. But you're an individual person. The key is individualizing each one. What might bother one may not bother another. So, let me, oops. How can I get down to it? I'll just get down to it.
Use the mouse on the laptop.
I think that's Jesus not.
We've got somebody competing with us here. I have a lot of these that you can.
Timothy Kudo had no illusions about what would happen when he joined the Marines and went to Iraq and Afghanistan.
You know, as an infantry officer, we were trained pretty extensively on how to take the fight to the enemy. And we were trained to kill, and the word was to kill.
But after doing just that, there was no training for civilian life, where he walks the streets of New York feeling like a killer.
And then when we came back, and we also went our separate ways, it was something that we never heard about again. It's something that we were left by ourselves to think about. That's very difficult.
It's what some experts, like retired Navy psychiatrist William Nash, call moral injury, the emotional wounds from having done or failed to stop something that violates deeply held values.
The aftermath of moral injury is shame, guilt, anger, and a feeling of, I can't trust myself anymore.
It's different from post-traumatic stress, which is fear-based, with flashbacks to terrifying, life-threatening combat events. Moral injuries affect the conscience. Kudo's remorse stems partly from an incident where Marines under his command killed a pair of Afghan teens they thought were insurgents.
But I can't forgive myself for it. I know that their families won't forgive me for it. And the people who can forgive me are dead, and nothing's going to change that either.
But Nash, who is in charge of Marine combat stress programs, says forgiveness is the key to dealing with a moral injury.
You can't unring the bell. You can't just whitewash it and it didn't happen.
While the focus for years has been on PTSD treatment, Nash is hoping other researchers will start concentrating on troops with moral injuries and finding what he calls psychological first aid treatments to help ease their guilt. For those suffering now, what's left is to live with regret and simply try to move on. Sagar Meghani, Associated Press, The Pentagon.
Now that's Bill Nash. He's been to Tulsa. He was a Marine psychiatrist, and he's one of the leaders in this whole process of trying to find out how we can help soldiers with moral injury. Okay? Because he was deployed many times, and he said they've got an injury very different than post-traumatic stress. And that's the values. Okay? Any questions about that? He's been to Tulsa. I've had dinner with him. Good guy. Now, I'm going to go down to this one. And I want you to listen. See what you think of this one.
And I was about to open up a meme gunshot that went over our heads from the right to the left. I immediately stepped from behind my vehicle, and my Marines were already discharging their weapons towards the protesters. I unslung my weapon, and I put the weapon up to my shoulder, and I began to fire. When everything was said and done, we went and did a reconnaissance of the bodies. We were looking for weapons. And I remember looking at the bodies, and we're wearing the traditional jolly, white jolly, and they were just completely soaked with blood. And I remember I was looking at the bodies, and I'm looking for weapons, and I don't see any weapons. And then I look up, and about 50 meters away from protesters was some RPGs that were lined up against the wall. And I thought to myself, they had the capability to fire at us if they wanted to, but they didn't. So that means that they were holding protests, peaceful protests. And then all of a sudden in your mind, you realize that you just murdered some people. 20 minutes later, a car sped into our checkpoint area, and we discharged our weapons. And come to find out that it was innocent life again. And then another one happened. And then another one happened. By the last one, I had an occupant of the vehicle asking me, "Why did you kill my brother? We didn't do anything. We're not terrorists." I was so devastated. My commanding officer, Captain Schmidt, he came up to me and said, "Staff Sergeant," he said, "What's wrong? What's wrong? You look a little under the weather." And I said, "Well, today's been a bad day, sir. We killed a lot of civilians." And he said, "No, today's a good day." When he said that, I realized that I was in the wrong place. That maybe I wasn't cut out for it.
Okay. I want you to think about that. What do you think of that? Give me a response to this one. There's two things going on here. Yes?
Well, maybe to me, it's evidently, we have two people there with different vices.
Yes. And perception of the situation.
Yeah.
True?
Yes.
So it's not always the facts, it's the perception of the facts. The captain is saying, we got rid of some guys that could have killed us because they had RPGs lined up to do so, but they were just protesting, right? Yeah. Well, the captain was saying, it's been a good day. We killed all these people. He's there saying, no, it's been a bad day because his interpretation, perception, these are innocent people, but they couldn't have fired on them. You got me? Yeah. You see how complex this gets? How individualized it is that each person has to look at this? So, that's why it's and that's why you've got to hear this. You're going to be talking to the sergeant about moral injury. You might be talking to another soldier about PTSD. Another soldier's not affected by this at all. We did our duty, Captain. Y'all see where I'm coming from? Yeah. So it's complicated. That's why you have to interview, pick up the moral injury, pick up the post-traumatic, which is fear-based, trauma-based, so that you can assess how you're going to try to work with it. And the VA now is saying, we cannot stick post-traumatic stress label on everybody we see. And we cannot use these different therapies. We have to make sure that diagnosis is good, right, appropriate, and apply the appropriate method. Now they've got strategies, programs to address moral injury. Okay? Yes?
Lanny, if, let's say a pastor is here, they've got someone in their congregation that's come back, or maybe came back 20 years ago, but they're showing some of these signs, depression or anger problems, or self-medication with substance. What would a good recommendation for a pastor be? What resources here in Tulsa area would you recommend? What would you suggest?
The VA is really modernized, upgraded. There's a new clinic that's going to be opening here in Tulsa soon. I've worked with the VA. We've trained them on these guys. We've trained the nursing staff on this whole stuff. Herb Jansen and I have done that. Herb's a retired psychiatrist. He and I have done a lot of this kind of training stuff with these folks. You've got to be able to listen to where they're coming from and listen for the words they're saying. Shame, unforgivable, all that kind of stuff is moral injury related. And I'm also on the board of the Coffee Bunk. This next month, I'm starting a group on moral injury for recipients of the Coffee Bunk. We're going to try to do these groups on a regular basis, okay? I'm starting it with a chaplain, a military chaplain, Army, sergeant. He and I are going to put together the group. In fact, we've already got it ready to go. We're going to start probably 5 sessions. And the first session, do an assessment, write down their story in longhand, share their story with the other members of the group, support one another. Military folks, it doesn't matter what branch of service you are, they support each other. Air Force supports Army, they'll fight in the ball games, but I'm just saying, if you're a veteran, they grab onto each other. Doesn't matter what service you are. Right? So we're doing this. Carter Chet with the VA is doing it. With if you're enrolled in the VA, working with the VA, you can be probably put in one of his groups. It's an online group though. He does a lot of these kind of presentations as well. Carter Chet. He's a good friend of mine. Yes.
So if they're not military and they're suffering from moral injury, do you have suggested resources locally?
Yeah, I would say go to the VOA, that one program. And Herb and I have talked about moral injury for nurses in the hospital setting. A small group of 6 people at the most. Small, if you get to be more than that, you got a gang. More than that, you got a company. So it needs to be a small group where they write down what's happening. And a lot of the moral injury with medical people has to do with the medical administration that puts controls on what they're trying to do as doctors and nurses. You know? And the COVID really produced a lot of this. I told somebody here one illustration. I was watching CNN one night, and this young doctor from New York comes out, he's taking off his clothes, working with patients, taking off his medical gear, and he's been interviewed. And he says, I can have the COVID washed off of my skin in the shower and having my equipment laundered, but I can't wash it out of my soul. And that's moral injury.
And do you see moral injury too in survivors of suicide? Because I see that my cousin, I truly believe when we're talking about this, that he suffers from moral injury for not intervening with his brother.
Absolutely. You know, I could have, would have, should have. There's all of that stuff. Some of you, it doesn't bother you so much. Maybe you went through something here, it no longer bothers you, but now but with others, it bothers them extremely deep. It affects their life. And a lot of our military people have the deeper thing going on if they've been in combat particularly, or if they've been and somehow abused or lost colleagues of them. Now, he has these slides. There's other videos in here. Here's child welfare. Here's physician burnout. This is about a doctor who anticipated suicide after a patient of his died. And it's kind of fuzzy, but I put it in there anyway. But,
You talk about getting powerful, how can we do that?
he's got,
If we have your email address, we can attach it, send you an attachment.
and I have a card. If you have a card, give me your card. I'll send it off to you today.
Nancy, can we just go ahead and send it to everybody we have
I
email?
have emails on everyone.
We have everybody in the room's address, we'll just automatically send it.
Yeah, just send everybody a copy of it, even those who haven't been here. Was this helpful?
Check out his book table. Check out his book table.
Yeah, look at some of the books. Those are just a small number that, but there's a lot more research and writing going into this. This is a spiritual division that's opened the door for all of us on the spiritual division, working with people. Y'all have a great one. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you, Lanny.